We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
President Joe Biden faces uncomfortable challenges from both within and outside of his party in the upcoming presidential election in 2024. And the nation begins to feel the heat build for that particular election. All this and more in today's edition of Liberty Nation Radio here on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. As the president plays a dangerous game of chicken with both New Hampshire and Iowa regarding who gets to be the first in the nation to hold their primary or caucus, we have to wonder just how much damage it will do to his reputation to back down at this late stage. Also on today's show, what perils lie ahead of No Labels and Cornel West and their third-party challenges. We'll also be looking at how Donald Trump is bearing up under the weight of multiple indictments and even exposed the latest hidden numbers in the job report. What aren't you being told by the talking heads in the White House? The nation is possibly more divided than at any time in recent history, and yet the political games must continue as they have done since the beginning. Now, I want to take a brief moment to say a special thank you to our listeners out in Hastings, Michigan on WBCH 1220 AM and 93.1 FM. Thank you for being here. Remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access breaking news, analysis, top stories, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. Let's get started. A careless bluff or a desperate need to get the primary votes in early? Well, this is the conundrum facing President Joe Biden. And what is a commander-in-chief to do? Well, we're fortunate to be joined by Liberty Nation's senior political analyst and longtime host of this here radio show, Mr. Tim Donner, to figure that out. Thanks for being here, Tim.
Okay, a pleasure, Mark.
So, Tim, New Hampshire does not want to play ball with President Biden when it comes to the Democrat presidential primary. Could you give us a brief rundown of what's been happening and what the latest situation is, please?
Well, the current state of play is what I would describe as a stare down, because for more than 100 years, New Hampshire has always been the first primary. It's famously the first primary. And Iowa's the first caucus that goes about a week before. So Iowa and New Hampshire were 1 and 2 over the long march of political history over the last century. But especially since South Carolina turned out to be his resurrection place in 2020, Joe Biden decided to reward them by making them the first primary on the schedule for 2024, breaking a long tradition. And of course, it's 2020 when Jim Clyburn stepped in, the most powerful politician in the state, and was willing to endorse Biden. He won that primary. The party ran all the other moderate candidates off and handed the nomination to Biden. So fast forward to 2023, and I guess Biden and the Democratic National Party felt like Iowa and New Hampshire would just bend to their will and say, okay, sure, we'll go after South Carolina. But both those states say not so fast, because New Hampshire, by state law, is required to hold its primary a week before any other similar contest, which means they would be breaking their own state law if they didn't go before South Carolina, right? So it's a stare down now with New Hampshire saying, we're not going to back down. And if it means running our first in the nation primary without Joe Biden on the ballot, then so be it. And someone like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. can step in and get himself a most unexpected victory. And it's the same thing in Iowa, where they expect to be the very first contest in the nation, and they're not backing down either. So I wrote about this months ago on LibertyNation.com that really this could be a tremendous embarrassment for Joe Biden, because either way you cut it, he's in trouble, because he's in trouble if he loses New Hampshire and Iowa, and he's in trouble if he backs down from his pledge to make South Carolina first. So it's a heads, he loses, tails, he loses kind of proposition.
Yeah, it's a big credibility problem, isn't it? So the fact is, the way you put it, you said that he wants to reward South Carolina. I don't quite see it as it's a reward. It's not like petting South Carolina on the head and saying, you're a good state, you got me to office. I think it's where he can reliably get out of the gate with some primary wins. I think that's the key thing to it. But obviously, he's going to win in pretty much every state anyway in the primaries. But he can get a nice solid one. Say, look, it's the black people in in South Carolina that are supporting me, and try and replicate that noise around the country.
I suppose so. But, as a sitting president with about a 60-point lead, or 40 or 50, whatever it is, it's not really a contest.
Sure.
Joe Biden is not in a position to have to kind of posture politically. I do agree that South Carolina is far more representative of the Democratic coalition, which means there's far more minorities than there are in Iowa and New Hampshire, which are extremely white states, right? So they're not representative really of the country as a whole, or especially of sort of the winning Democratic coalition for November, which is more focused on coastal states and urban environments to generate votes.
So I'm wondering, Joe Biden, he took New Hampshire in 2020 by, I think it was almost 7 points. And it was more than 7 points for the candidates in 2022 for the Senate and House race. So even if New Hampshire were the New Hampshireites, I'm not sure what they're called, the New Hampshireites and Iowites were particularly Iowans. I knew that one. If they were particularly peeved at Joe Biden's apparent snubbing, I don't think it would make a major difference to the electoral college numbers anyway, would it? Or am I missing?
No, I don't think so. It would be really nothing more than a rank political embarrassment for Biden. So, he may feel like he should stick to going South Carolina first, but by the time he gets there, under the current scenario, he's going to be wounded in the court of public opinion for losing the first two contests to someone in Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's desperate for some sort of hint of credibility or mainstream interest. And he will get it if he wins in Iowa and New Hampshire.
So what we're looking at is Biden will take a hit that, while it won't affect him in New Hampshire or Iowa, could affect him come 2024 in other areas, because he's been made to look as though he's lost credibility by having somebody like RFK.
I think to some degree, but like so many other things in this election, Mark, this is uncharted territory. We don't know what happens when a president refuses to enter a primary. I mean, Lyndon Johnson probably wished he had in 1968, because it was a New Hampshire primary. That was his downfall. He actually lost it. But his showing was so unimpressive that he was convinced to drop out of the race. And of course he did, and the rest is history. He became a one-term president. Joe Biden wants to avoid that.
That is a path to be avoided if he can. We'll be back with Tim Donner after this short break, talking the no labels threat. Don't go anywhere. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Don't get caught up in the media madness. Join our movement for free thinking and free speech at libertynation.com. publishing news and analysis 24/7 with original articles by our team of authors who tell it like it is. Join us each week for online TV shows, The Uprising Podcast, and Liberty Nation Radio. We believe in free thinking and free speech. We are LibertyNation.com.